Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about, well, three different topics, and I think I'm going to break them into three different short videos because I think that it'll be easier for you guys to go back and refer to them if they're all separated. The general focus of today are environments and how we can add more interesting and dynamic effects to our terrain that we created last time. I'm showing you my project view right now because I want to remind you there's been some question about where projects get saved. The only time, at least when you're creating the project, the only time where you have an opportunity to define where the project files are is right here, location. So mine is under on my desktop under Unity Projects. And if I wanted to change that, I could click these 1, 2, 3 dots right here. Hopefully, Unity will open for us in a moment. When we talk about environments, we're going to use terrain like we used last time, except today, I'm not going to be doing much to color that terrain because we're going to be talking about how to add environments to the terrain. So real quickly, I'm going to create a terrain object. There's my terrain object. I'm going to go to the inspector, to my terrain settings. We learned all about this last time, but I'm going to bump my terrain down to 20. Whoa, that's way too big. 20 by 20 by 20. Hopefully if we zoom out, this should be relatively small terrain, and it is. And what we're going to be talking about in a second are these terrain features. I'm just gonna pop up some spots of my terrain real quick just to make it interesting. We're making some terrain here. Doesn't have to be real pretty. Just want to get something going. Okay, here we go. Here we have our terrain. So what I'm going to do, here we go. What we're going to do is the first topic in our environments topic is to learn about trees and grass. The one thing you'll need from this video that you won't have in other videos, or that you'll need for other videos rather, is something called the Environments Asset Package. Now this is an asset that's built into Unity, and it's a really great package to be able to do some stuff right off the bat without having to worry about unnecessary coding or unnecessary asset acquiring. So today we're talking about environments, and we're going to use import the environments package. Let's do that. We are going to go to assets. We are going to go to import package, and we are going to choose environment. Now a bunch of stuff is going to happen, or is going to be included with our environment package. But the key thing, we're just going to go ahead and import everything. The environment package gives us some control schemes that we're going to talk about, but most importantly, it gives us a bunch of water and tree and grass textures and ability. We're going to add these in here. And then we're going to use this environment package to add trees and grass to our terrain. Now you may be asking, well, if this environment package is so great, why doesn't it come with Unity by default? The big issue here is project size. So see all this stuff that Unity is extracting right now, this is all being added to my project. So in a game where we don't need all of this world building and open world functionality, we may not want the environments package. But there are a lot of assets out there that we can use to be able to make our game a little bit more, leverage a little bit more of Unity without doing as much work on our part. So I'm sure, as most of you have figured out, we can do a lot of this stuff by hand, right? We can go get our own textures, we can go get our own tree models or whatever, but this is a way. You can see now we have a standard assets folder with a bunch of stuff here. This is a way for us to use Unity and leverage some of that stuff without having to make it ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to go to the trees view here. Now the really cool thing, while we may not have a lot of options in the 3D editor, or for 3D objects, terrain has a lot of really cool options, and one of them is to be able to place trees. So I want this guy right here to be my tree mountain. He's going to have a lot of trees. To do that, I need to edit I need to define a tree. So we're underneath this tree tool. I'm going to say edit trees, add tree. Excuse me. So when we go to add tree, there's a thing here that asks for a tree prefab. We're going to talk about what prefabs are later in the course, but for now, we're just going to click this little dot to be able to find our trees. Now, a lot of these were included in fact, all of these were included in the environment package. And 4 of them, you notice, have tree symbols next to them. So I'm going to choose Conifer Desktop, and I am going to select Add. Now I have a Conifer Desktop. Now notice that when I start placing trees, I have a couple of options here. First one is brush size. This should be pretty familiar to us. So let's see. I want to add a couple notes here. When painting trees, add a new tree prefab. Be careful of brush size and tree density. So this should be pretty clear to us, or if you've ever played a game where you're loading a bunch of stuff, it should be pretty clear that the more things we add into our game, the slower our game will perform. So we can add as many trees as we want, but those trees are going to negatively affect the performance of our game. So I'm going to change, and actually this brush width is huge right now, so let's drop this way down to 1. And notice that tree density is at 83. I'm going to drop that way down as well. I'm going to drop that to 12. And if I click here, and Unity's going to work with me for a second, I end up with one gigantic tree. I'm going to drop this tree height way down. I'm going to try placing another one. And as you can see, this is already a lot of work for Unity to do. It also should be pretty clear right away that this terrain that I've made is a very, very small. So the trees are meant to be on a much larger surface. In fact, let's see what happens if I bump this up to 15. Looks like, because my tree density is set so not getting trees as I like. All right, let's drop brush size down. So while I'm painting trees along here, and we can see right now, see how it has tree height set to random? That means that it's going to try to make my trees look a little more realistic by altering the heights. So that way it looks more like a forest. So here are my trees. I hadn't anticipated my terrain being so small, but that's okay. So we've got our tree options that we've looked at. We know how to use brush size, tree density, and tree height. So the other thing I'm going to show you guys, if we go down into our forest here, is we're going to add some grass next. So in our environments, we can add trees. And we can also paint grass and plants. Now, when we paint grass and plants, these are not what we would consider a game object. Each of these trees is a game object. So if I go here, each of these guys has their own data about them. But if I start adding grass, grass is something called a billboard. I'm going to add that here. This is a billboard, not a game object. Or it doesn't take up as much memory. So what a billboard is, it's something that's painted to look like a 3D object. Game object is the wrong word. 3D object is what I meant. That's a better term. So if grass was 3D, were 3D objects, then imagine having to create a 3D object for every blade of grass. That would take up an insane amount of performance and memory. So what we do for grass is it paints something that looks 3D, but they take some shortcuts with lighting and angles so that the grass doesn't take up as much memory as, an equal amount of trees would. So what we're going to do is we're in our little plant painter right here. And to be able to paint grass, just like when we did trees or when we did textures, we have to define our grass. So we are going to add a grass texture. Excuse me. So we're going to add a grass texture. And over here, where it says texture detail, you guessed it, we're going to select our circle again to pick some grass. I'm going to go ahead, because there are so many assets in my asset folder now, I'm going to go ahead and search for grass. There we go. Let's do grass frond 2. And you see we have a max width of 1, minimum width of 1, and maximum width of 2. What that means is, again, there's some randomness happening here. So some grass is going to be thicker than other grass. Minimum height is 1, maximum height is 2. Noise spread represents how random the grass is. Here's our healthy color, and here's our dry color. And you can see earlier I was talking about billboards. This is going to save us a little bit of memory. So I'm going to click Add. Right now we have a brush size of 52 and opacity of 0 and a target strength of 0. This means that our right now we're not painting anything, right? Because our opacity is 0, our target strength is 0. For now, we're going to want to keep our opacity and target strength very low, so we don't end up painting a ton of grass. So I'm actually going to, and when I say low, I mean decimal point low. So we're going to do 0.25 for our opacity, and we're going to do 0.25 for our target strength. So remember, while brush size is a huge number, 52, opacity only goes up to 1. Target strength only goes up to 1. Okay? So by saying 0.25, even though there's a huge difference between this number and this number, 0.25 is just a quarter the amount of grass that we might paint. So the other thing that I'm going to do, just a quick tip, is I'm going to change the brush that I'm using, because painting with a solid brush like this is going to make for really cartoony looking grass. I'm going to grab a more sparsely sprayed brush that's going to make our grass come out, well, in this case, it's going to come out really thick because my terrain is so small. Let's actually drop some stuff about this. Let's edit our grass texture and see if we can drop our minimum height to 0.2 and our maximum height to 5. There we go. That's going to look better. And our minimum width is going to be 0.2. Our maximum width is going to be 0.5. Get us a little bit more on scale here. Noise spread. Okay. Apply. And so what it's doing is it's painting it in this pattern, the pattern of my brush. So if I was doing something even sparser, I'd end up with different clumps of grass. And the big way to make some distinctions here is to really change your grass brush up. And I'm actually going to make my brush a little bigger so that you can see the spread a little bit more. I'm going to make my brush bigger, and now you can see that my grass is a little bit patchier. And what I can do is I can always paint over with different brushes if I want to give it more layered effects or more detail. The other thing that will add detail is if I add a second grass texture, right? So I paint with this grass for a while, and then maybe I paint with a different grass so that I can add some variation into my scene. Or I add another texture that's the same texture, but I edit the details. Maybe I make it taller or smaller, or paint with a different shaped brush. Okay, so that's how we paint grass. Obviously, we have some. I have some height and clumping issues to work with because of the terrain, but hopefully this video has at least given you an idea how to work with the tools. Like I said, I'm going to try to break these into smaller videos, so the next video is going to jump right in where this one picks up, or where this one leaves off. And it's going to be about environment effects. Thanks for watching.